Ellen DeGeneres sat behind her desk, beaming as the audience applauded. The set of the Ellen DeGeneres show was buzzing with energy. Today was a special episode, with a guest who had been making waves in Washington. Karoline Leavitt, the young and poised White House press secretary for President Donald Trump, had agreed to come on Ellen's show for an interview. Ellen had always had a knack for turning interviews into lighthearted banter, mixing humor with the occasional tough question. But today she had an agenda. Karoline was known for her strong conservative views, and Ellen was prepared to take her down a peg or two. As the cameras rolled and the applause settled, Ellen turned toward Karoline, who was seated across from her on the couch. Karoline smiled, adjusting the delicate gold cross necklace that hung from her neck. It was subtle yet eye-catching, symbolizing her faith and unwavering principles. "So, Karoline," Ellen began, her trademark mischievous smile spreading across her face. "I have to say, I love your necklace. It's very, well, Christian of you." Karoline, ever composed, smiled politely. "Thank you, Ellen. It's very meaningful to me." Ellen raised an eyebrow, clearly playing with her guest. "I mean, it's cute. But, you know, it's kind of old-fashioned, don't you think? I'm just wondering, does it come with a God will fix everything sort of vibe?" The audience chuckled, sensing that Ellen was about to push Karoline's buttons. Karoline, though, remained calm. She had dealt with much worse in the political arena. Ellen leaned in slightly, her tone turning sarcastic. "You know, with all the division we have in this country, a gold cross seems like a very on-the-nose choice. I just wonder, does it really work?" Karoline looked at Ellen, her expression unwavering. She had expected such jabs from Ellen. The liberal talk show host had always been outspoken in her views against conservatives, especially those tied to the Trump administration. But Karoline was prepared. This wasn't the first time her faith had been questioned. "Well, Ellen," Karoline replied, her voice steady, "it works for me. It's not about fashion or trends, it's a reminder of my faith. And my faith keeps me grounded, especially in times like these." Ellen laughed lightly. "Oh, don't get me wrong. I love a good faith story. I mean, I believe in love, kindness, and of course, the power of positivity. But when I see people wearing crosses like that, it kind of makes me wonder if they've forgotten that faith is supposed to be about action, not just a fashion statement." The audience reacted with mixed laughter and applause. Ellen had, as always, found a way to stir the pot and create a divide. But Karoline wasn't rattled. She had dealt with far worse critics than Ellen. She believed in the power of her message, and that was more important than any mockery. But Ellen wasn't done. "Tell me, Karoline, do you pray for your boss every day? Do you think God is looking down on him and giving him guidance?" she asked, her tone sharp. Karoline's face remained serene, though she could feel a twinge of irritation. "I pray for our country, Ellen. I pray for everyone, including the president. We all need guidance, and I believe God has a plan for each of us." Ellen smiled, her eyes twinkling. "Well, it looks like you've got your faith all wrapped up in a neat little package. I hope it works for you." As the segment went on, Ellen couldn't help but feel that Karoline wasn't the typical guest she could break down with her humor. Instead of the usual tension or discomfort, there was a calm resolve that Karoline maintained, and it intrigued Ellen more than she'd expected. The interview continued, but in the back of Ellen's mind, something was gnawing at her. The jokes had been playful, but they had felt a bit hollow. Karoline's unwavering faith in something larger than politics and TV banter had actually made Ellen pause, even if just for a moment. At the end of the show, as the cameras began to roll off, Ellen stood up to thank Karoline. The audience clapped, but Ellen had something else on her mind. After the cameras were off and the show had wrapped, Ellen's crew began to disassemble the set, and the bustling energy of the studio shifted into a quieter, more subdued atmosphere. Karoline stood up, adjusting her gold cross necklace once again, smiling and exchanging pleasantries with the staff who had come to thank her for being on the show. Ellen, however, lingered behind, her mind swirling. As much as she prided herself on her wit and ability to leave her guests speechless, today had felt different. Karoline hadn't flinched when Ellen poked fun at her faith. In fact, it was clear that the young press secretary didn't rely on the approval of others to define her beliefs. Ellen watched as Karoline made her way toward the exit, her demeanor calm and collected, far removed from the tense political atmosphere she so often found herself in. It was then that Ellen made an unexpected decision. She walked over to her guest, who had just stepped off the stage, and called her name softly. "Karoline, can I talk to you for a second?" Ellen asked, a note of sincerity in her voice. Karoline turned and smiled politely. "Of course, Ellen. Is everything all right?" Ellen, usually the one to take control of every situation, felt a slight hesitation in her step. There was something about Karoline's quiet strength that unsettled her. It was different from the usual bravado she encountered. I just wanted to apologize, Ellen said, her voice softer than usual. I realize I may have pushed too far earlier with the jokes. I wasn't trying to offend you. I don't know, I guess I felt like I had to make light of the situation, you know? Karoline blinked, clearly surprised by Ellen's apology. Ellen, you didn't offend me. I know it was all in good fun. I wasn't expecting you to understand where I'm coming from, but I'm okay with it. Ellen sighed. She hadn't expected such a level of grace in response. Most of her guests, especially those who held strong political views, would have gotten defensive. But not Karoline. She just stood there, calm and unflustered, as though the conversation itself wasn't worth getting worked up about. I guess it's just hard for me to wrap my head around how someone can wear something like that. Ellen gestured lightly to the cross necklace and be so, well, sure about everything. I mean, faith can be so confusing sometimes, don't you think? Karoline took a deep breath, then spoke in a voice that held the wisdom of someone much older than her years. Faith isn't about having all the answers, Ellen. It's about trust. Trusting in something bigger than yourself, something that will always be there even when the world feels like it's falling apart. You may not get all the answers now, but that doesn't mean the journey isn't worth it. Ellen was taken aback. She had heard people talk about faith before, but something about Karoline's words felt different. They weren't coming from a place of judgment or superiority. Instead, they were born from a deep personal conviction, one that Ellen hadn't encountered in quite the same way before. You really believe that? Ellen asked, her voice a little softer now. Karoline smiled, nodding. Yes, I do. It's not always easy. There are days when I question everything, but that's part of the journey. It's about holding on to the hope that there's something more to all of this beyond what we see and hear in the media every day. Ellen fell silent for a moment, reflecting on Karoline's words. She had spent most of her life as a comedian, a talk show host, someone who made a living out of poking fun at the world around her. But Karoline's message, quiet as it was, had cut through the noise. It was something that Ellen hadn't expected to hear today, and it left her feeling unsettled, in a way. You know, I think I get it, Ellen said slowly, her mind processing the conversation. I may not be on the same page with you when it comes to religion, but I respect where you're coming from. It's not easy to stand firm in what you believe in, especially when everyone is constantly judging you. Karoline's face softened. Thank you, Ellen. I know we might not see eye to eye on everything, but I appreciate your willingness to listen. As Ellen watched Karoline walk out of the studio, she couldn't help but feel a shift inside herself. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't just playing the role of the talk show host. She wasn't trying to get a laugh or a rise out of her guest. Instead, she found herself wrestling with something deeper. A sense of humility, perhaps, or even curiosity about the faith that had been the foundation of Karoline's strength. And so, as the crew wrapped up the show and Ellen sat down at her desk to review the day's footage, she couldn't help but wonder if there was more to this whole faith thing than she had ever realized. The following week, Ellen couldn't shake the memory of her conversation with Karoline. The interview, which had initially seemed like a simple moment of playful banter, had become something much deeper in Ellen's mind. She couldn't help but replay Karoline's words in her head. Faith is about trust. Trusting in something bigger than yourself. Ellen had heard similar things from other people over the years, but there was something about Karoline's delivery, her quiet confidence, that struck a chord in Ellen. Ellen had always prided herself on being open-minded, but when it came to religion and faith, she had always kept a safe distance. She didn't need to be a believer to appreciate the beauty of kindness or the power of love. She believed in those things, but the idea of organized religion or divine intervention always felt foreign. Yet now, something inside her was beginning to change. The next day, as she sat in her office between shows, Ellen was surprised to see a message on her phone from Karoline. It was a simple text. Hi Ellen, I just wanted to thank you again for having me on your show. I really enjoyed our conversation. I hope we can keep the dialogue open even if we don't agree on everything. Also, I wanted to invite you to a small gathering at my church this Sunday. It's a group of people who have become like family to me. You don't have to come if you don't want to, but I thought it might be something you'd find interesting. Ellen read the message twice, feeling a strange mix of curiosity and hesitation. Karoline's invitation was genuine, and she could tell that the offer wasn't about trying to convert her, it was about sharing something meaningful to Karoline. Ellen had never been to church before, not in the traditional sense, anyway. But there was something about Karoline's openness, her warmth, that made Ellen want to take the leap and see what this faith of hers was all about. After some contemplation, Ellen replied, "Thank you, Karoline. I appreciate the invitation. I think I'll come just to see what it's all about. Who knows? Maybe I'll learn something new." She sent the message and felt a slight flutter in her chest, unsure of what she was getting herself into. She had attended countless events, hosted tons of celebrities, and had been to plenty of gatherings, but this felt different. This was a personal invitation into something that had shaped Karoline's life, and Ellen was eager to understand it, if only to see why it had such a profound impact on her guest. Part 4. A different kind of gathering. Sunday arrived, and Ellen, wearing a casual sweater and jeans, found herself driving to the church Karoline had mentioned. The building was modest, nestled in a quiet part of the city, far from the glitz and glamour of Hollywood. It was nothing like the grand churches Ellen had seen in movies or documentaries. This one was simple, with a welcoming sign outside that read, "All are welcome here." As Ellen stepped out of her car, she noticed several people milling about, laughing and greeting each other like old friends. They seemed warm, open, and genuinely happy to be there. Karoline was waiting by the door, looking just as poised and graceful as she did on the show. "Ellen," she called out, waving enthusiastically. "I'm so glad you came." Ellen smiled, feeling a little out of place. "Thanks for having me. I wasn't sure what to expect, but it seems nice." Karoline laughed softly. "It's definitely not the Hollywood version of a church, that's for sure. But you'll see, it's all about community here. Just come in and relax. I promise you're among friends." As they walked into the church, Ellen noticed the warmth of the room. The walls were adorned with simple decorations, and there was a small stage at the front where a group of people were gathering. They were preparing for a worship session, and Ellen could feel the energy shift from casual conversation to a collective sense of anticipation. Karoline introduced Ellen to a few of the people in the group, all of whom greeted her with smiles and kindness. They weren't starstruck by her celebrity, instead, they were genuinely interested in her as a person. For the first time in a long time, Ellen felt like she wasn't just a TV personality or a public figure, she was just Ellen. The service began, and Ellen sat down in a pew, trying to calm the nervous energy inside her. She had no idea what was coming next. The music began, and the voices of the congregation filled the space. It wasn't like anything Ellen had ever heard before. The songs were simple but powerful, filled with lyrics about love, faith, and hope. The sound of the voices harmonizing was soothing, and Ellen could feel something stir deep inside her. Karoline, sitting beside her, sang along with ease, her eyes closed in peaceful devotion. Ellen, on the other hand, sat quietly, absorbing the atmosphere. She had always associated church services with stiff rituals, but this felt different, more personal, more grounded. The people here weren't just reciting prayers, they were living them in a way that Ellen couldn't quite put into words. After the service, Karoline pulled Ellen aside. "So, what did you think?" Ellen hesitated, unsure of how to articulate her feelings. "Honestly, I didn't expect to feel anything at all. But there was something about the music, it felt real. Like people were connecting to something bigger than themselves." Karoline smiled warmly. "That's the beauty of it. It's not about grand gestures or making yourself look good. It's about connecting with something that can give you peace even when the world feels chaotic." Ellen nodded slowly, still processing everything. As much as she'd tried to resist the pull of faith in her life, she couldn't ignore the quiet sense of comfort that had settled in her heart during the service. It wasn't about believing in everything they'd sung or said, but there was an undeniable peace that Ellen hadn't expected. "I don't know if I'll be coming back every Sunday," Ellen said with a grin, "but I have to admit I felt something today. Maybe there's more to this than I thought." Karoline placed a hand on her shoulder. "That's all it takes, Ellen. Just being open to it. I'm glad you came." Weeks passed since Ellen's visit to the church, and while the experience lingered in her mind, Ellen didn't rush to make any sweeping conclusions. Instead, she found herself returning to the conversations she had with Karoline, replaying her words and examining her own thoughts. Ellen, for all her wit and ability to entertain millions, had never felt so unsettled by something so simple. Karoline had offered her a glimpse into a world where faith and trust didn't have to be proven by logic or reason, they were something felt, something lived. It was a Saturday morning when Ellen received another message from Karoline. "Hi Ellen, I hope you're doing well. I've been thinking about our conversation and I wanted to check in with you. No pressure, but I just wanted to know how you've been feeling about everything since you visited. Ellen felt a sense of gratitude as she read the message. It wasn't just about the invitation anymore, it was about the genuine care Karoline had shown her. The press secretary wasn't just interested in whether or not Ellen agreed with her faith, she was invested in Ellen as a person, a fellow human being trying to navigate the complexities of life. Ellen sat down with a cup of coffee, the early morning light filtering through her window. She thought back to that first conversation when she had mocked Karoline's cross, only to realize that it wasn't the necklace or the symbol that mattered, it was the belief that lay behind it, the hope that had been sustaining her. With a sigh, Ellen composed her reply, "Hey Karoline, thanks for checking in. I've been thinking about our talks a lot, honestly. I don't know if I'm ready to dive headfirst into faith or anything, but I have a new respect for what it means to you. And to be honest, I think I'm starting to see the value in trusting more, just not in the way I always thought I would. It's a work in progress, but I'm glad you invited me into your world." Karoline's response came quickly. "Ellen, that means the world to me. I'm proud of you for being open. Trust is a journey, and I'm here for you whenever you want to talk. Just know that it's not about perfection, it's about the willingness to explore." Ellen set the phone down, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. Maybe she didn't need to have all the answers. Maybe faith wasn't about understanding every little detail or convincing others of your beliefs. Maybe it was about allowing yourself to be vulnerable enough to explore, to connect, and to trust that there was something beyond what we could see. The following Sunday, Ellen found herself once again standing in front of the church. This time, it was a little less daunting. She didn't feel like an outsider, nor did she feel the pressure to conform. Karoline was there, waiting to greet her with the same warm smile. "You came back," Karoline exclaimed, her voice filled with genuine surprise and happiness. Ellen smiled back, a little sheepish. "I figured I'd give it another try. I'm not sure I'm ready to sign up for a weekly sermon just yet, but I think I'm starting to understand why it means so much to you." Karoline linked her arm with Ellen's as they entered the church. "That's all I'm asking for, Ellen. Just that willingness to see things in a new way. Everything else will come in its own time." As they took their seats, Ellen looked around at the people in the congregation. They weren't just singing, they were living their faith. It wasn't about the perfect words or the perfect actions, it was about the willingness to show up day after day even when the world didn't make sense. It was about trusting even when you didn't know what was on the other side. For the first time in a long while, Ellen felt truly present. She wasn't worrying about ratings or making jokes to cover up the deeper questions in her life. She wasn't thinking about how the world would view her or what her next move would be. Instead, she was simply there, listening to the music, feeling the warmth of the people around her, and letting herself believe that there was something bigger than the chaos of everyday life. And as the service came to a close, Karoline turned to her, her eyes full of understanding. "How are you feeling?" Ellen paused for a moment before responding, a small smile playing on her lips. "I'm feeling a little less lost." Karoline squeezed her hand gently. "That's the beauty of it, Ellen. You don't have to have all the answers. Just trust the journey." As they left the church together, Ellen realized that the world had felt a little quieter, a little more peaceful since she had opened herself up to something she hadn't understood before. It wasn't about agreeing with everything Karoline believed, nor was it about adopting a particular religion. It was about the journey. The willingness to explore, to ask questions, and to trust that even when you didn't have all the answers, you were still moving forward. Ellen DeGeneres may not have found all the answers to life's biggest questions, but she had discovered something just as valuable: the power of trust, the strength of community, and the beauty of opening your heart to the unknown.